Fighting for our community is something the law firm of Bordas & Bordas takes very seriously. The Ohio Valley isn't just a place where we work, it's where we live. That's why you'll see us fighting the battle against breast cancer, coaching youth sports, providing meals for those in need, and supporting our local YMCA. Bordas & Bordas, fighting for justice.
Hi, I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome to another edition of the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. With me here today is my law partner, Chris Regan. We're going to be talking about a couple of different things in areas of the law today that affect our area, our state, and our nation. One of those things is nursing home litigation, and the other is some of the most severe types, or the most severe type, of course, injury that someone can sustain, and that's a wrongful death, and how the loved ones of someone who's affected by that may need the services of a lawyer, and what types of things they may need to do before even going to a lawyer. So, Chris, thanks for being here on the show again today.
Great to be here, Jamie.
Chris, we're going to start off talking about nursing home litigation and nursing homes in general. And over the course of the years, our firm has handled a number of nursing home cases where a nursing home has caused some type of injury, or unfortunately, some cases even death, to residents of nursing homes. It's an issue, especially right now, as the baby boomer generation gets older and of the age where they may have to be going into nursing homes to receive care because they can't care for themselves, and maybe they don't have loved ones that are able to have either the time or the energy or the money or the skill to care for them. So it's become a pretty common occurrence now.
Absolutely, Jamie. I mean, I think that most people don't understand that over the past 20 to 25 years, the nursing home industry has become just that, an industry in the United States of America. I mean, whereas previously it was dominated by nonprofits, by secular nonprofits and religious and charitable institutions, it is now an industry being conducted as big business in the United States. And while the profit motive and the free market can bring improvements to any industry, it can also bring a great deal of cost cutting. And when the product is the health and safety of our seniors, our parents, and our elderly, that type of cost cutting can have devastating consequences. And some of the cases that we have seen in our firm and that have been seen across the country as a result of the industrial nature, the assembly line practices and big business efforts to cut costs in the nursing home world have been shocking.
Well, of course, Chris, one of the things that is a common cause of problems in nursing homes are not enough staff members, not enough skilled nurses. And again, those things are things that the nursing homes do in order to try to save costs so they can make more money. And it's not like these nursing homes, most of them that we see, are just barely getting by. I mean, they're making millions and millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. What can people do to determine whether or not a nursing home is properly staffed?
Well, there's a couple of places that you can look. The United States government maintains a website called Nursing Home Compare that's available at Medicare.gov, and that site will tell you what the average staffing ratios are for the state, the region, and that particular facility that you enter in there, if you want to look one up. You can also visit the facility. I mean, the eye test, the ear test, and quite frankly, the nose test, the smell test, can be important when you go into one of these facilities to determine if they are paying enough people and keeping them there long enough to understand what's going on. Now, it's very important. Most people go during the middle of the day, and that can be a mistake because you have folks who are, organizations that staff the facility heavily during the day when visitors might be there, and then have nobody there on the night shift, nobody there on the late shift. And so it's important to visit a nursing home at different times of day to get a true idea for what's going on there, because they may just have high staff on that 11 to 7 shift, 11 in the morning to 7 p.m., and not have adequate staff the rest of the time to take care of the patients.
One of the things that you mentioned is that the smell test can be a big deal, that, you walk into a nursing home and there's a foul smell, you get a pretty good sense that they're letting residents lay in their own urine, letting them lay in their own feces, and of course that causes all kinds of problems with sores and other issues. what are the nursing homes supposed to do in order to prevent people from getting bed sores and to prevent them from having these major problems that can lead to infection, sepsis, and ultimately death?
Well, there's a whole series of federal regulations that govern nursing home facilities, and we see again and again that even an average nursing home may be cited for dozens or even 100 violations of those regulations when surveyors come in. And essentially what the industry has done is driven the standards down to a point where things that should be considered egregious violations are considered standard. And to get a serious or jeopardy violation tasked against them by the federal regulators, they basically have to get someone seriously hurt or killed, and it's a very serious problem. I mean, as you point out, bed sores are an issue for anyone who has a lack of mobility, and you need adequate staff to make sure that residents who can't move themselves are turned so that they don't lay on one spot of their body all the time. They need to be turned to the left, turned to the right, spend some time on their back and even on their front so that they don't have that constant buildup of pressure that can lead to bed sores. People who are incontinent need to have, if they have diapers, they need to have those changed. If they have catheters, they need to have them kept clean. If you don't have the staff to do those things, as you say, people are left to sit in foulness and in waste for long periods of time, and that breeds infection, that breeds disease, but most of all, it's a terrible affront to the person's dignity and their quality of life. And when nursing home corporations short-staff their facilities, that's what they're doing. It's really no different than when we saw food companies earlier this year purchasing low-quality ingredients from China so that they were putting essentially melamine and paperboard into food products, or when an auto company shaves metal and shaves material out of the vehicle until it becomes unsafe to drive, except the product in this nursing home industry is the dignity and the safety of our parents and our elderly. And when they shave money out of that staff, that's what you have, is a person who is deprived of their dignity, deprived of their health, and then can ultimately be deprived even of their life.
Of course, one of the things that people have to do is if you have a loved one in a nursing home, you have to be a little bit proactive and look for, to see if they're developing bed sores. And some of the places, you want to look are the places that make contact with the bed, such as the elbows and the ankles, but, the heels basically. The coccyx is a big one, of course, the tailbone, all those different areas that make contact, but they, you do have to be proactive almost with your loved ones when you're in nursing homes, because so many occasions we've seen where this has happened.
I think that's essential, Jamie, and it's you see why it doesn't happen sometimes, because people, particularly the sons, if it's a mother in a nursing home, a son doesn't want to be inspecting personal areas of his mother. That's why you have professional care people, and another woman who's going to be doing that, and so people tend to close their eyes to that, but you can't afford to do it because the companies are not willing to pay adequate staff to do that. So if you weren't on top of it, in some cases you really can't count on that staff to do it, even though you should be able to, because they are legally required to do those jobs. But you're right, you should pay attention.
Chris, in addition to people getting bed sores, there are other things that happen in a nursing home, things like dehydration. What are some of the other things? I mentioned one, dehydration, but what are some of the other things that commonly occur as a result of neglect in nursing homes?
Well, other areas of cost cutting besides bed sores, as you mentioned, are lack of proper nutrition and hydration. A lot of our elderly reach a situation where they're not able to eat and drink the way that you and I do, and therefore they need a lot of assistance doing that. Once again, that plugs into staff. Is someone there making sure that they drink, making sure that they eat, making sure they eat enough of their plate each meal. And it also is the food of good quality. Oftentimes it's not. A lot of times nursing homes spend less than $2 per meal per resident. You think about that. You pay more to eat at McDonald's than what they're spending on food in a lot of these corporate-run nursing homes. So nutrition and hydration is a key issue. Also, supervision is important. A lot of times when we reach a certain age, either through Alzheimer's disease or dementia or other problems, we're not with it anymore. And so we require, just like when we're young children, when we reach that age and have those conditions, we require supervision. And if we don't get it, people can fall and injure themselves that way. They can also what's called elope from the facility. That means basically wander off. Elope is a term that gets used in there. It doesn't mean get married. Right. It means run away. And sometimes people who are not mentally competent leave these nursing homes because they're not supervised, they're not watched, and are just unable to protect themselves out in the world, and they can lose their life, they can be injured, and you have very tragic cases, particularly in the cold weather months like we're experiencing now, Jamie. Of course, so those are just some more examples of when you don't have the proper staff, what kind of circumstances can arise.
You know, our firm's seen cases like that where people have just disappeared from nursing homes and turned up dead, months later. Out in the wilderness and things like that, and it's a very, very sad, very tragic. We've also seen things involving medication errors, where people aren't given the proper medication. I mean, is there anything that families can do in order to try to prevent that from happening, where their loved ones are getting the proper medication when they're there in a nursing home?
Well, there are some things that I think people can pay attention to. Obviously, choosing the facility is very important because, I don't like to put the blame, on the family. I mean, obviously, our government and we as taxpayers and people through their health insurance, pay a great deal of money to these nursing home corporations to do their job. And it's not really the job of the family to take care of that for them. But on the other hand, frequently visiting and paying attention to visiting at different times a day and being observant of the staff and being observant of the conditions that your loved one has are certainly worthwhile things to do. Because if you don't keep tabs, it may very well be that nobody is keeping tabs. Depending on what type of corporate entity is running the facility in which your loved one is living.
Yeah, and this happens not just it's not something that just happens here locally. It happens all over the United States. But there are both large chain nursing homes, and there are smaller chains, and sometimes even single entity nursing homes. And you see it across the broad spectrum. I mean, you see it in the big chains, you see it in the single facility nursing homes, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Now, there can be problems either way, but we definitely have seen a commodification of nursing home care and a consolidation, meaning that large corporations buy up more and more smaller facilities, the mom-and-pop type facilities or the local religiously affiliated facility. And, just like a lot of other things, a lot of people felt they got better care, better attention, better customer service from their local hardware store than they do from what we can now call the big box retailers. And I think the larger nursing home corporations do present a certain kind of jeopardy in that everything is very standardized and profit-driven right down to the fraction of a penny. That's how those large companies like to make their money, and it can be a real issue.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue talking about nursing home care, nursing home litigation. We'll also talk about the most serious injury that someone can have, which is a wrongful death. Stay with us on the Bordis and Bordis Legal Review.
Fighting for our community is something the law firm of Bordis and Bordis takes very seriously. The Ohio Valley isn't just a place where we work, it's where we live. That's why you'll see us fighting the battle against breast cancer, coaching youth sports, providing meals for those in need, and supporting our local YMCA. Bordis and Bordis, fighting for justice.
Welcome back to the Bordis and Bordis Legal Review. I'm Jamie Bordis. Chris Regan, my law partner, and I are here today talking about nursing home cases, nursing home litigation, nursing home care, and then also we're going to be talking about the most serious type of injury that someone can sustain, which is a wrongful death. Chris, over the course of years, you've handled a number of nursing home negligence cases, some that have included, unfortunately, wrongful deaths of residents in nursing homes. Including what was then a record-setting $50 million verdict in a case that you and my dad tried down in the Clarksburg, West Virginia area, which at the time was believed to be the single highest verdict ever returned on behalf of an individual family in the state of West Virginia. On these cases where someone does tragically die as a result of either neglect or abuse or some type of negligence on the part of a nursing home, how is that different than just your standard type of case?
Well, I mean, obviously, death is the most serious, civil injury, civil wrong that can be committed against a fellow citizen. Just to give a little bit of background and history on that, Jamie, in the beginning days, the earliest days of the law in the United States and going back to England, which is the source of a lot of our common law, there was no claim for wrongful death. If a person died, their case died with them. And this led to very perverse, situations where you were better off killing someone than hurting them. However, over time, obviously the injustice of that became clear, and the different states of the Union passed wrongful death statutes. And the Wrongful Death Act provides that when a person loses their life as the result of the wrongful act of another, whether it be negligence or intentional misconduct or abuse, that the survivors, not the person who has died, obviously they've died, but the survivors, the loved ones, the family members, can maintain an action for a wrongful death. And we do sadly see that in the nursing home context more than many other contexts because of the things we talked about in the previous segment, because of the cost cutting, because of the understaffing. And so that has led to, as I think we said in the opening, some extremely tragic cases, of which the case with the verdict that you mentioned was certainly one of them, and we could talk about that a little bit.
Well, Chris, speaking of that case, in that particular instance, it was a relatively young woman who was in a nursing home, not to be there for the rest of her life, but to get some skilled rehab so she could go back home. And unfortunately, they were so inattentive to her condition and her situation that she died while she was in there.
That's right. That was Toni Meredith, just 57 years old, going on 58, and she had really only a 3-week to 4-week stay planned for the nursing home to recover from some medical procedures that she'd had, and she began to develop gastrointestinal distress, and they picked up on it a little bit to begin with. But then the key evidence in that case was the nursing notes, and the nursing notes are supposed to be maintained, every day as a log of the nursing staff coming in to check in on the person and find out what's going on with them. And in the case of Toni Meredith, there was, I believe, a near 10-day gap in those notes where simply nothing was charted. And as it turned out, nobody was paying attention to Toni Meredith, and over time her condition deteriorated to the point where when she was finally rushed to the hospital, some of her internal organs had turned gangrenous from infection and from neglect. And this was something that could have easily been cured, and she could have easily been saved had she received timely medical care. But she was simply ignored to her death by the staff at HCR Manor Care, a facility down in Clarksburg, West Virginia, called the Heartland of Clarksburg.
Chris, how can this happen? How can, in today's society, can someone be in a facility in the United States of America, we're not talking about some third world country, in the United States of America, and just no one pay attention to her for 10 days? How's that happen?
Well, I think it one of the things that we don't realize sometimes is that just because somebody is assigned a job doesn't mean they know what they're doing in their job or that they're doing a good job. And people tend to assume when you're there in the nursing facility, because there's staff around, that those people are up to their job and are doing their job. And when they're not, we can really be fooled. If someone is getting sick, that we as Americans tend to be tough. We tend to go into work sick. We tend to say, no, I'll be all right. We tend to not visit the doctor at the earliest possible time and not to complain about it. And when people don't do that and don't get the attention from the nursing staff because you think that, well, if I was really sick, they'd be checking me out, and then suddenly you find out that they're just not doing it. The people aren't up to their jobs. They aren't enough of them. And the results can be absolutely tragic, which is why when we talked about earlier, I think it's a good suggestion. You have to have family members coming in and trying to be on top of that, because it's very dangerous when these understaffed corporations are left to do a job that they just aren't up to.
Through the course of the years, you and I have both been involved in a number of wrongful death type cases, both in nursing homes and outside of nursing homes, such as explosions or someone getting run over by a dump truck or someone dying as a result of an automobile crash. When that happens, when somebody loses a loved one as a result of potentially someone else having done something wrong, one of the things that people frequently don't know what to do is, should they get an autopsy, after that happens? Is that something that's a good idea, or are they just wasting their time, or, is it expensive? What should people do if they think that someone may have, one of their loved ones may have died as a result of the wrongdoing of another?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in that. Anytime you have a suspicious death, an unanticipated death, an autopsy is appropriate. There's law that suggests that our county coroners and medical examiners should do an autopsy whenever a death occurs that is unexpected. But a lot of times they don't want to do it. They'll find a reason not to do it, or they'll suggest to the family, why bother with this? But that can be crucial information that can only be obtained one time. When you have an unexpected death or a suspicious death in any way, whether it's at a hospital or a nursing home, or whether it's out in the world as a result of an accident, if the cause of death is not totally obvious, or if the death itself is not expected, an autopsy is a crucial piece of evidence, and we hate to see a case when it's not available. because it can make it very difficult and leave issues open to question that really shouldn't be.
Well, and one of the problems is that, oftentimes it may be obvious how someone died, but the defendant who caused their death may try to come up with all kinds of reasons why, oh, no, they didn't really die from what I did. They died because of this or that. I mean, you've seen even situations where people try to say, well, geez, this person must have just had a heart attack, or they must have had this happen, or something else. So that's one of the reasons it's so important.
We've even seen, I mean, there's no limit to what an insurance company will stoop to, Jamie. I mean, you and I have both even seen the astonishing circumstances where someone is killed as a result of a car wreck or a trucking wreck. A truck may go left of center and kill someone in their vehicle, and the next thing you know, the insurance company is saying, well, how do we know that this person didn't have a heart attack at the wheel before the truck hit them? There's no proof because there was no autopsy. I mean, you see amazing, illegitimate defenses like that asserted by insurance companies in wrongful death cases because those cases are valuable, and they'll use any stick to beat a snake and try not to pay what's owed.
Another thing that a lot of people don't know is who's entitled to bring a wrongful death case and who's entitled to collect the money that's returned either in a settlement or by a jury verdict in those types of cases. A lot of people think, well, it must just be the spouse, the surviving spouse, or maybe the surviving children. But the West Virginia law actually allows a broader scope of people to recover.
That's right. In West Virginia, it's the not only the surviving spouse, but also the children and the parents and even the brothers and sisters in the appropriate circumstance, Jamie. In Ohio, it's even a little bit broader than that, whereas nieces and nephews and uncles can be brought into the picture under the Ohio wrongful death statute. And then there's a catch-all for folks who don't have sort of the standard family members, who may have no family. Other people who were financially dependent on the deceased can be what is called the personal representative or the administrator of the estate for purposes of filing a wrongful death claim. So there's a broad class, depending on the state that you're in, of people who are adversely affected by a wrongful death who are then able to file that action if there has been a wrongful death.
And of course, one of the things that somebody has to do in order to actually be the one to bring the lawsuit is they have to be appointed as the administrator of the estate of that person, or they may have been named as such in a will, but you can't just go do it. You have to be appointed by the court in some way.
Right, and that's something that an attorney can help you with, and that also, I mean, it's first of all important to be, have some guidance from an attorney to get that appointment process started and underway. But I think one of the most valuable things that we do for our clients, Jamie, anytime there has been a suspicious death or a wrongful death, is conduct a thoroughgoing investigation into what occurred. Because when we do that, we can offer folks one of two things. Either an explanation, if there actually has been a wrongful death, of what the negligence was and who did it, and possibly relief through a court case, or if there wasn't a circumstance like that, if it was death by natural causes, a thoroughgoing investigation can allow people to have that closure, to put the issue to rest and be at peace with what's occurred. Because a lot of times, and I know you've seen this in your practice, I'm sure, I've seen it in mine, people will call 5, 6, 7 years later and say, hey, here's what happened, and I've always wondered what was the truth of this. And of course, by then it's too late. So by contacting someone early on, you really get a chance to find out what the truth is and do the right thing. Most states have 2 years or less as the appropriate time within which a wrongful death suit has to be filed. So it's really important to get a hold of somebody early on and get that investigation underway so you can know, in your own heart what happened.
And of course, even in situations where people have 2 years, you don't necessarily want to wait 2 years, of course, because there is a lot of investigation that needs to be done. Attorneys have to do their jobs, if the ones that do it the proper way, anyway, want to do their jobs. And the earlier you come to see an attorney, the better people's recollections are, the better their memories are, the better chance there is that the defendant or wrongdoer hasn't destroyed records or altered records, things like that. So that ensures a better, more thorough and more accurate investigation when that happens.
Absolutely. Those are all excellent points.
It is tragic when someone loses a loved one, and of course the money being returned can never bring that person back, but at least a couple things can happen through litigation. One is that it does give the family some closure and feel like perhaps they can do something to prevent this from happening to someone else again in the future. But also, a lot of cases, you have a wage earner, and it allows their family to replace those wages, allows the kids to still go to college, allows the grandchildren to be provided for in some way that the grandfather or grandmother would have provided for them, and makes their life a little bit better because it's got a loss of that person not being there. So there is a lot of good that can come from it. But
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that really stands out, Jamie, is a lot of corporations, whether it's nursing home corporations, whether it's public utility companies, actually price in the wrongful deaths they may cause to their actions. Meaning they may actually be asking the question in a corporate office, what should we do? Should we make it safe, or should we pay the lawsuits? Should we staff the facilities or pay the lawsuits? So only when we have appropriate litigation out there that puts a good value on our lives, so these companies have to take that into account, only then can we influence them to do the right thing. And so I think that's critical for people to pay attention to, because otherwise these companies are going to do what they're going to do.
We're out of time. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Bordis and Bordis Legal Review. Chris, thanks for being here today. We'll see you again next week.